The cruelest thing a woman ever does to a man. She doesn't do it out of cruelty. She does it out of instinct. And that's what makes it so hard to survive. You loved her. Not the performance of love, the real thing. The kind that reorganizes your life quietly, without announcement. The kind that remembers small details and shows up without being asked and stays when staying is difficult. You gave that to her completely. And somewhere between giving it all and losing her anyway, you were handed a silence so total it felt like a verdict on everything you are. But here is the contradiction that will reframe everything you thought you understood. She didn't lose interest because you gave too little. She lost it because of how you gave. Because the way most men love, completely outward, nothing held back, self fully surrendered, doesn't build attraction. It erodes it, slowly, invisibly, until the man who loved her most is the one she feels least pulled toward. Picture this. A man sits in a car outside his own home after work. He checks his phone, no message. He sent one 3 hours ago. Something small, warm, thoughtful. She read it. He can see that. He puts the phone in his pocket and sits another 2 minutes in the quiet, trying to remember the last time she reached for him first. He can't. He goes inside and makes dinner anyway. That man is not failing at love. He is failing to understand what attraction actually needs to survive. This video will hand you the mechanism, the exact psychological logic behind why devoted men become invisible. Not to make you cold, not to make you play games, but to show you what actually went wrong and what it costs you to keep not seeing it. What you are about to hear will make certain memories make sense in ways they never did before. Most men who live through this never tell anyone the full version. They describe the surface. She grew distant, we drifted apart, it just stopped working, because the full version is harder to speak. The full version involves admitting that you felt the shift happening in real time and responded by doubling your effort. That you sensed her pulling back and interpreted it as a signal to pull closer. That you apologized without knowing what you'd done wrong. Softened opinions you hadn't actually changed. Rearranged plans around her mood. Gave more and more into a space that was growing colder. And called all of it love. You did not imagine it. You are not weak for having done it. It is the most natural response in the world. When something valuable is slipping, you grip tighter. The problem is that grip, applied to attraction, produces precisely the outcome you were trying to prevent. The pattern has a specific emotional texture. You remember a version of her from earlier, warm, engaged, present. You spend the middle period of the relationship trying to return to that version. Every effort is aimed at recovering what was there before, but the efforts themselves signal the very thing that killed it, that her warmth is the condition your stability requires. One man described it like this. He said the harder he tried, the more she seemed to look through him, like he had become furniture, present, functional, familiar, and completely without pull. Effort and value are not the same thing. She can feel your effort. What she cannot feel anymore is your weight. That is the distinction most men never hear. Effort is visible. Weight, the particular gravity of a man who is complete within himself, is felt. And the more his effort replaced his weight, the more her attraction responded to the absence of the second thing, not the presence of the first. The brutal expectation every devoted man carries is that love, applied consistently and generously enough, eventually lands. That loyalty accumulates into something she cannot ignore. That if he just keeps showing up, she will eventually recognize what she has. That expectation is not just wrong. In the specific context of attraction, it is the thing that ends it. Understanding why requires going beneath the behavior, into the mechanism itself. There is a law operating underneath every attraction dynamic, and it has nothing to do with fairness. Call it gravitational polarity. Two people generate attraction between them not through closeness, not through similarity, not through the elimination of tension, but through the sustained presence of two distinct, separate gravitational fields. His and hers. The pole exists because there are two poles. The moment one pole dissolves into the other, the field collapses. Not weakens, collapses. This is not metaphor. This is the operational logic of how attraction functions in the human nervous system. When a man begins organizing his emotional life around a woman, when her moods regulate his moods, When her approval is the variable his confidence runs on, when his plans exist to accommodate her availability rather than his own direction, he is not loving her more completely. He is dismantling his pole. He is erasing the distinction that made him magnetic in the first place. She doesn't register this as he loves me too much. She registers it as a feeling she cannot name, a quiet, creeping restlessness, an absence where something used to be, something that felt like weight, like ground beneath her feet. Now it's gone, and in its place is effort. Visible, generous, exhausting effort. Here is where the second mechanism enters. Women are neurologically attuned beneath conscious thought to signals of self-possession. Not wealth, not status. Self-possession, the quality of a man who carries his identity as something that does not bend under relational pressure. A man whose direction existed before she arrived and continues when she withdraws. A man who is not altered by her coldness because his stability does not live in her warmth. That quality transmits through behavior, not words. It shows up in whether he changes his position when she goes quiet, whether his confidence requires her smile to function, whether he is recognizably himself in her presence and outside of it. Picture a man who leans slightly forward every time she leans back. It's almost imperceptible, but she feels it every time. And with each forward lean, something in her nervous system files a quiet record. He is following. I am leading. Leaders do not feel desire for followers, they feel responsibility for them. Responsibility is not attraction. She did not fall for someone she felt responsible for. She fell for someone who felt solid. And solid is precisely what the overinvested man stops being. What this looks like across the full landscape of a real relationship, that is where it becomes impossible to look away. The first signs are always small. That is what makes them so lethal. So Wednesday night, he's telling her about something that happened, a conversation at work, something that actually mattered to him. She's at the kitchen counter, phone face up, half listening. He can see her eyes move to the screen twice in 30 seconds. He adjusts, makes the story shorter, lighter, more palatable. By the end, he's edited it into something that no longer sounds like him. She says yeah, and goes back to the phone. He stands in the kitchen with the residue of a moment he shrank to keep her comfortable. She didn't ask him to shrink. He did it automatically. That automaticity is the problem. It shows up in texting. He sends something warm in the morning. A thought, a small gesture, the kind of thing that used to land well. She reads it. 6 hours pass. He sends a follow-up. Hey, you okay? She responds to the second message, not the first. He is grateful for the response. He does not notice that his gratitude for a 2-word reply is now the baseline. That he has calibrated downward so gradually he no longer remembers what the original calibration felt like. It shows up in conflict. She makes a cutting remark, something with an edge that shouldn't be ignored. He lets it go. Not because he's at peace with it, because her displeasure feels like a threat he cannot afford. He goes quiet, then overcompensates an hour later with warmth she didn't earn. She accepts the warmth without acknowledging the concession. Somewhere in her nervous system, the record updates. His limits are not real. His lines move. A man without real limits is a man without real weight. And she cannot be drawn to something that has no resistance. Here is the reframe that reorganizes the whole picture. She is not pulling away from his love. She is pulling away from the evidence that his love has replaced him. Every act of accommodation, every softened edge, every plan reorganized around her mood, none of it reads as devotion. It reads as confirmation that he no longer has a self more pressing than her approval. And then there's the man at the gym she mentioned twice last week. She doesn't elaborate. She doesn't need to. He's someone who noticed her without reorganizing himself around her. Someone who hasn't yet had the chance to disappear. She doesn't prefer him because he's better. She's drawn to him because he's still there. Strip away the behavior. Strip away the pattern, the mechanism, the scenes. Go underneath all of it to the single truth that makes everything else make sense. The man who loves too much, who gives too freely, concedes too quickly, adjusts too readily, is not loving from abundance. He is loving from fear. The fear is quiet, often invisible even to himself, but structurally it controls everything. The fear that who he is, absent the performing of love, is not enough to be chosen. Every over-explained text, every apology that arrived before the offense was named, every opinion abandoned under social pressure, every plan built around her availability. These were not expressions of love. They were negotiations with fear. If I give enough, maybe she won't look for the thing I'm afraid I don't have. But fear has a frequency, and she heard it not in what he said, but in the cumulative architecture of how he moved. The slight hesitation before he stated an opinion. The relief visible in his face when she smiled at him. The way his energy lifted when she was warm and collapsed when she was cool. Every one of those microsignals transmitted the same thing. I need you to confirm that I am enough. Without your confirmation, I don't fully know. That transmission is the most unattractive thing a man can broadcast. Not because women are cruel. Because attraction, the biological, neurological, non-negotiable kind, is a response to evidence of strength. Specifically, the strength of a man who does not require her to be complete. Here is the line that will divide opinion, but which holds under scrutiny. A woman who withdraws from a devoted man is not betraying him. She is responding, with biological precision, to the slow disappearance of the man she was drawn to in the first place. He changed. Not in a single moment. In the accumulation of 100 small surrenders. An attraction does not respond to intention or history or the sincerity of feeling. It responds to what is actually being transmitted in the present. Picture this. A man alone in the apartment after she's gone. He is not angry. He is trying to locate the specific failure, the day it turned, the thing he should have done differently. He reviews the evidence and finds nothing but devotion. He cannot understand how devotion became the cause of loss. He is looking for a mistake. There wasn't one. There was a condition. The condition was that he stopped being whole while trying to be everything to her. You cannot sustain desire in someone who senses you have already surrendered. That is not a judgment. That is a description of how the system works. And once a man genuinely sees it, not intellectually, but in his body, his position changes entirely. The shift doesn't come from strategy. Any man who approaches this as a technique, creating distance, manufacturing unavailability, running calculated withdrawal, will eventually be seen through. Techniques collapse under pressure. Character doesn't. The shift that changes everything is simpler and harder than any technique. The decision to treat your own life as the non-negotiable starting point. Not the relationship. Not her. Your life, your direction, your standards, the things you are unwilling to dissolve for the comfort of approval. That decision, made seriously and lived consistently, changes what you transmit. Not because you performed it, but because it's true. A man who has genuinely made that decision does not need to manufacture distance. He has real distance, the natural space of a person with actual somewhere to be. He does not track her mood to calibrate his confidence. He does not require her warmth to feel stable. He loves, when he loves, from a self that exists independent of the response. That is not coldness. That is the opposite of coldness. It is the warmth of someone who chose you freely, not desperately, not anxiously, not conditionally on your continued validation of him. The man who loves from wholeness is the most dangerous thing to a woman's indifference, because she cannot manage him with withdrawal. He was already complete before she decided. The contrast is stark, and she feels it before she names it. The man who needs her approval is moldable. The man who doesn't is interesting, indefinitely, because you cannot fully predict or fully contain someone who doesn't require containment. If this is landing somewhere real, if some part of you is recognizing a version of yourself in what's been described, stay with that recognition rather than deflecting from it. What comes next is where understanding becomes usable. The return to self is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in small choices, the opinion not abandoned, the plan not rearranged, the silence held when filling it would have been easier. Each small choice rebuilds what the small surrenders dismantled. A man rebuilt that way carries something different. She notices it even before she understands what changed. Here is the warning, and it is not about women. The pattern of self-erasure in love does not stay confined to one relationship. A man who collapsed into one woman will collapse into the next one, because the collapse was never about her. It was about the state of his relationship with himself before she arrived. Change the woman. Carry the same interior condition. Produce the same outcome on a different timeline. This is the version of the lesson most men refuse. Because it is easier to locate the problem outside, in her psychology, in her choices, in the unfairness of attraction, than to recognize that the mechanism began inside, long before the relationship did. The cost of refusing this lesson is measurable. Not just in relationships. In the erosion of self-respect that follows each cycle, each experience of giving everything and receiving diminishing returns. In the quiet accumulation of evidence that confirms the fear the behavior was designed to manage. Maybe I am not enough without the performance. The man who keeps performing love without building self will eventually perform his way into invisibility in every room he enters. Picture a man in his 50s. Sharp mind, genuine heart, real capacity for depth. 3 significant relationships behind him, each ending with a variation of the same dynamic. He is not a failure. He is a man who was never handed the correct diagnosis. He kept treating the symptom, working harder, loving more visibly, without ever identifying the underlying condition. That man's life did not have to look like that. The diagnosis was available. The correction was possible. It required something harder than effort. It required the willingness to stop outsourcing his worth. What becomes possible on the other side of that is not a tactical advantage in relationships. It is the foundation of a life that does not require any particular person's response to feel stable. That foundation is the precondition for every relationship worth having. The men who build it don't chase. They are sought. And the final question, the one this entire video was building toward, lives in the section that follows. This is what the whole journey comes down to. Not a technique. Not a rule. A single reorientation that changes the entire structure of how a man moves through relationships. Stop being someone who needs the relationship to survive. Become someone the relationship needs in order to mean anything. That shift, interior, structural, behavioral, is the difference between the man who loves completely and loses quietly, and the man who loves completely and remains. Not because he withheld. Because he never stopped being someone worth staying for. The men who carry this wound, the men who gave everything and watched it drain away, are not weak. They are, in many cases, the men most capable of real depth, real commitment, real presence in a relationship. The tragedy is not that they loved. The tragedy is that somewhere in the loving, they received the message from culture, from silence, from the absence of anyone telling them differently, that loving meant dissolving. That devotion meant subordinating the self entirely to the object of it. That message is wrong. And the correction is not to love less. It is to remain whole while loving fully. To bring a self to the relationship that the relationship cannot consume, because a self that can be fully consumed has nothing left to offer once the consumption is complete. If this channel has handed you something real, a framework, a name for something you've felt, a clarity you didn't have before, subscribe. Not as a reward, because this is what this channel is built to do, and there's more of it coming. If someone in your life is inside this pattern right now, giving everything, feeling the return diminish, not understanding why, share this with him. Not as advice, as a mirror he might not have access to otherwise. And leave a comment with this: what is the one thing you gave in a relationship that cost you yourself? Not the relationship, yourself. Because that answer is the beginning of the only correction that actually holds. The man she never forgot was not the one who loved her the hardest. He was the one who never stopped being someone she could lose.